Hi, it's Jon Ginoli from Pansy Division,
And Chris Freeman from Pansy Division.
and we're here to dissect our first album, Undressed, which came out on Lookout Records 30 years ago in 1993. We really wanted an uncensored lyric and an uncensored cover. So our friend Alex, who we did an interview with earlier this year, he posed for the cover. You know, one of the reasons there's a naked guy on the cover is because well before we figured out what we were going to put on the album cover, Alex said, "Hey, if you ever want me to pose nude for your album cover, I'll do it." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Yes."
I kind of thought maybe we'd go into the story of how it got to be an album. In around 90 or so, you were starting to write songs and had this idea and had a name already. And you did the Raging Woody cassette. And then from there, how did we get to having this first album? Because really, you started just a few months, maybe, or 6 months or so before I joined. And
Yeah.
then, like a year after I joined, we were signed.
So I had this idea for the band. I wrote four songs. I didn't even have a guitar then. I'd sold all my equipment before I moved to California after my first band broke up. So I borrowed a guitar from a roommate and he helped me record them. So I had four songs, the first four songs I'd written for the band. They're all on Undressed. But this is just me doing demos on guitar. But then I thought, well, I need to put a band together. And I really wanted it to sound a certain way. So I went back to Illinois, where I had moved to California from, to play with some musician friends back there who I knew would get what I'm doing and what I was going for. So we went back to make a demo, and about two-thirds of that album turned out to be just what I was going for. So then later I got back to San Francisco with a tape that I could then play for people and say, this is what it's supposed to sound like. 9 of the 13 songs on the final version were on a tape that I had made of Undressed, a cassette to sell at our shows before we had a record deal. So that's what I gave Chris after I put an ad in the paper looking for gay rock musicians. But then we went in and re-recorded a few songs and recorded a couple new ones, and then voila, first album.
When you mentioned giving me the tape, that was October of 91?
September.
September, right?
Yeah.
Because I went away for October. That's right. And then, we've already had interviews with Kent Whitesill, who did the initial recordings,
We interviewed
right?
Kemp, we interviewed Larry Livermore, and we interviewed Alex Vizekis Paul, our cover model and go-go dancer.
So when you were thinking of that, not only just in terms of having the offer from Alex to do that, what did you have in mind for the album cover? What were the key points that you wanted to deliver?
Well, I wanted it to be really bold.
Honestly, that naked picture of Iggy was pretty bold.
Yeah. When I'd done the original demo tape of Undressed that floated around before we finished this album up, I used the famous naked picture of Iggy Pop on the cover because I wanted an album cover that looked like that. So we had the willing volunteer to do it. But the background photo I took in 92, I was 32. I'd never really been out of the country. So I went to Europe for a month and I snapped all these pictures of pansies because there were fields of them. And so the photo of Alex got dropped onto the background of the flower photos that I had taken in the Netherlands. I took these photos thinking these might be useful, but I wasn't sure how. But then when we figured out to have Alex on the cover, then it worked. I thought about having a gatefold sleeve, but it was expensive.
Yep.
And I thought, well, the CD is what most people are going to buy. And there you can have the gatefold booklet. So I thought about it, but I thought having a gatefold sleeve on your debut album, I don't know. So the lyric sheet, ta-da, lyrics on this side. On this side, there's pictures. Yeah, taken at Slim's. And the one time Patrick Hawley played live with us, although he did later again, because he lived in Illinois, he came to San Francisco. And then how to use a condom, because it was the AIDS era, AIDS crisis, no treatments available. So it could
And
have been a gatefold with that on the inside, but we didn't do the gatefold.
And also, what we did at that point was we gave a little, I don't think we had the term back then, elevator speech, but we do now. And that's kind of what we were doing with the little notes about what the songs were about.
Yeah.
And I think you wrote all of those on the album, but we're going to go into how we feel about those songs 30 years later. We'll just go through the songs as they appeared on the debut record.
Yeah.
So the first song is Versatile. Now, out of all the songs, why that song at that point?
You know, of all the songs that we were recording for the album, that is the one that exceeded expectations of what I thought it would sound like. And I thought, this is so great. It's got to be the first song. That was one of the ones recorded in Illinois. Kent Weitzel played a great guitar solo. And there's a Pete Townsend reference in it because he had just admitted having sex with men by saying that he now knew what it felt like to be a woman. Well, he knew what it felt like to be a bottom, which is really what he was afraid to say. But that's why that reference is in. It was a very fresh reference at a time. It's still a good reference to have, but its urgency has receded. But I'm still really proud of that one.
It was followed up by probably our most played song ever,
Yes.
and probably the very best Pansy Division. So it's like the perfect Pansy Division song.
I think it's the quintessential song, Feminine Black Leather Jacket. It's the first song I wrote for the band, and it's as good as anything that we ever did. It's a 2-minute Motown power pop punk song. It's short and to the point, like those great early rock and roll hits. We tried to retire it once, and we brought it back right away. It's just like, yeah, this is one we need to play every time. It was a single. We talked about the single in another video, but yeah, had to be on there. That's the killer song. One of the top ones, I think. One of the top 3.
And it's interesting because for people who were straight who were hearing it for the first time, it was eye-opening. But also, I think Femme in a Black Leather Jacket really kind of threw the gay community even for a loop because, you know, Tom of Finland was really a big iconic art, queer
Right.
art, gay art. And it was all these macho guys in leather.
I wanted to counter that macho muscles image because I was attracted to a different kind of guy. So I thought, well, I'm going to sing about my desire, which is not really typical, I think. Back then, I don't think I would have used the word twink, but now that kind of is what it was. I remember the word twink being around as kind of a derogatory term rather than a descriptive term of like slim and boyish. I wasn't going for macho men.
Right.
Still don't.
And what's interesting is playing it now to a way more queer and trans audience that we've noticed.
Non-binary, yeah.
It really has a different impact that we didn't even expect.
It's great when things age well. That one's aged best.
Yeah. Out of any song probably you've written for this band, that song has stood the test of time and still says what it needs to.
Although the next song does also.
That's true. Bunnies is next. It could be one of our most X-rated songs, but certainly at that point, if you're new to the band and you're only getting to song 3 on the first album for the first time, then that's got to be the most X-rated song you've heard.
It's a no-fills, fat-free, catchy performance. It's 1 minute and 58 seconds. A lot of the early songs of ours were things that I based on stories that I heard or friends telling me things or things you heard from acquaintances. So it's kind of like I'm putting into song the things people talk about and the expressions that they used. And I'd not had a relationship, a fuck like bunnies relationship. So I thought, I want a fuck like bunnies relationship. So there it is. And it's as fun a song as any of the ones that we've gotten. It's right up there as one of our best songs too. And there it is on the first album. We've been going downhill ever since.
Okay. The next song was the last song you'd written for the record. It was actually not even on the original cassette, that I heard, and it replaced another song, Femme Fatale, which was a cover of Velvet Underground that may have ended up being the weakest song on the album and got relegated to the B-sides area on Pile Up. So Boyfriend Wanted, it's similar in nature to a couple of the other songs that we haven't talked about yet. But I think this song for me still stands up. It delivers in the lyrics in a way that the other two don't quite, but it's a punch.
Well, a lot of the songs on this album were meant to be in your face and fun and funny and unapologetic. But I'm a romantic guy, and so there's 3 or 4 songs on the album that are more relationship, romantic type songs. And Boyfriend Wanted was back from the days of personal ads in newspapers and gay papers, was kind of my personal ad. Back then, there wasn't gay marriage, but there's the line, all my straight friends are having weddings. Now I sing it, all my friends are having weddings. So that's something that has changed in 30 years, thankfully. But this was a very personal song.
Yeah. And it's interesting that it followed right after Bunnies. It's a stark contrast because you can have this crazed, unbridled sex, and then at the same time, now you've also got this insane yearning that doesn't get filled. And that carries over into song 5, which is Story So Far.
Yeah, the Story So Far and Boyfriend Wanted are kind of cousins. Story So Far was written about moving to San Francisco and seeing just a multitude of cute guys, but not being able to find a boyfriend. But it was optimistic. Ultimately, it's the story so far. And the last line of the last verse is, for now I wait. But I wasn't giving up. But that was kind of my predicament 3 years into living in San Francisco.
Yep. And then also, after living for 3 years in San Francisco, you saw a lot of the next kind of character.
So Hippie Dude, the next song, is probably the most outdated song on this record because I moved to SF in '89 and I just used to see all these cute long-haired guys walking down Haight Street and they were deadheads. And I'm not into the Grateful Dead. I have tried and I just don't get it. I just don't like the Dead. But that's what all those boys were there for. So that was kind of like my fantasy about having one of those guys, which I never did. The song also has a reference to another song from that period that we could have played it that way live. We shouldn't have recorded it that way. Now it doesn't really make any sense. It's still a good song. It was our first video. We did it on cable access television. And I remember I wore the wrong type of shirt. I wore this beige shirt that I had bought in Iowa that had a pheasant on it and said, Iowa, big cock country. But it was like brown on beige and it's like did not show up on TV. So that was my first image mistake.
Now, did Mark Klein, this was for Lavender Lounge, did he decide that was the song he wanted to do, or did you decide?
We decided what we wanted to play.
Oh, okay.
And I think one of the reasons I wanted to play that song was because I had that shirt and I thought would look great on TV and it'd be a good joke. Well, no. But the next one is one of my favorites, which is Curvature. I remember thinking, who else is going to write a song about curved dicks but Pansy Division? So Curvature was an early leap in subject matter that I thought was a good thing to write about. Again, overhearing people talk about things, I just thought, yeah, that's a song title. Curvature, yeah.
I think the next song is probably the song that when I got to flipping the tape over and putting it back in and hearing this next song, I think that's when I laughed out loud for the first time.
When you're listening to the demo tape, you mean?
Yeah, it's just a matter of context. I was on a train somewhere and I was listening on headphones, so nobody else knew what I was listening to. So to break up laughing, everyone was turning and looking at me, but it was definitely this song, which is probably the second best Pansy Division song on the record. It's just quintessential to the point where we played it almost as much as Femme.
A good friend of mine pointed out a guy, we were out somewhere, and he's like, I think he's in the club. And I thought, well, what club would that be? The cocksucker club. And I wanted to use that term in a positive way because it gets thrown around as an insult. And I'm like, no, I think that being a cocksucker is like a really good thing. So I wanted to use it in a positive sense. And it's a coming out kind of song too.
Yes, absolutely. And then follow it up with Krabby Day, because when you get your oh no, I won't go there. When you've been around
Krabby Day
enough,
is unfortunately another song of personal experience. But again, I thought, who else is going to write a song about having crabs? Well, no one. So Pansy Division will lead the way and just talk about something honestly that people will discuss and something that happens. But I thought it was humorous. I mean, I didn't enjoy it when I had it, but I did think it was funny, especially because the first time I got him on Christmas.
oh,
The worst present.
oh,
That was
wow,
actually before I moved to California, though, so can't blame San Francisco for that.
wow. Yeah, that might be the only song ever written about crabs.
Yeah,
Yeah, honestly. So next on this list is Luck of the Draw, which is the end of the
yeah,
trio,
the trilogy
the
of the more
trilogy.
romantic personal relationship songs. And Luck of the Draw, as I wrote on the song descriptions in the sleeve to Undressed, I wrote, remember the famous New Yorker portrait in which everything past the Hudson River is impossibly remote and distant? This is the gay San Francisco view facing the other direction. So that was me being in the Bay Area, taking stock after having been there a couple of years. And some people would move to San Francisco and they would just get boyfriends instantly, and that always pissed me off. I was happy for them, but it didn't happen to me for quite a while. So that's partly why I was singing about that at that time. This was a highlight, doing Rock and Roll High School by the Ramones as Rock and Roll Queer Bar, which I wanted to do because I had a friend, Don Baird, and in 1991 he and I had a club for a few months, a gay rock club called Rock and Roll Queer Bar, and I thought we needed a theme song. So I wrote this and actually did play it at Rock and Roll Queer Bar, which unfortunately only lasted 6 months because the club we were in shut down, and then I got busy with the band. Don still DJs at the Hole in the Wall on Folsom Street in SF, and he's a great DJ.
Yeah.
But we ended up giving a copy to the Ramones, to Johnny Ramone, at a show in San Francisco, I think in 93. Chris, who was tall, was able to reach up and hand it to him, and he grabbed it. But Johnny's a conservative, and I bet he didn't like it. But, oh well, I love Joey. So that's okay. Now, the next song on the album is my least favorite song on the album. This is Surrender Your Clothing. It's also the longest song on the album because it's the slowest song on the album. This was my attempt to try to do something where I was trying to sound sexy. I don't think I do sexy very well, and sometimes you have to fail in order to learn what you do well. So I don't think it's a bad song, but it's one I skip. But I know a guy who says it's his favorite Pansy Division song, so you never know. But I think it's a less successful attempt.
Yeah, I don't think we ever played it live either.
I think we did. I think back when
You think we
we
did?
only had an album's worth of songs to play, I think we played it, but I'm sure it was not ever a highlight of a show. So I think we played them all live at one point, back when we had
Quite possible. I don't recall, because I also remember that at the time that I came in and this was already done, you had another album's worth of material.
Yeah.
And what it actually became another 2 albums worth of material that we amassed at that point. So I think it was easy to kind of say, well, that didn't work. We've got this new song. Let's try this one. This next song we did for at least 5 years.
Yeah, this is Anthem. And it was our anthem. It was the second song I wrote for the band because it had the chorus, we're the butt fuckers of rock and roll. We want to sock it to your hole, which I had written 3 years before I ever envisioned having a gay band. I thought, well, if I ever had a gay band, I'd sing that. But I just couldn't imagine an audience before I got to San Francisco. And That was our call to arms. That was our anthem. It has a riff that is not very original.
Yeah, it could be Devo,
Oh,
you know,
Uncontrollable Urge or Beastie Boys Fight for Your Right. It's kind of been recycled. I didn't realize this when I wrote it and we first started doing it, or I probably would have changed it. But this was our declaration from the stage. So we would usually end with this song. And so it ends the album.
because what can you play after Anthem? I mean, it really, people are like, what? It was very shocking.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel as if that song, although it's still pointed, I didn't feel it aged as well.
The chorus is really worth hearing, but there's references in the rest of the song that are a little outdated to safe sex and
Closeted rocker.
condoms
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and you know rockers who won't come out of the closet. So that really was 30 years ago. There are three more songs to discuss that we recorded at this time
Right.
that are not on Undressed, and they all ended up on the singles collection pileup a couple years later. One of the things that was big at the time that we were starting the band were the Bill and Ted movies. So we did a single of Bill and Ted's Homosexual Adventure and did this great low budget video for it, which Chris filmed. He worked for a bank at the time and had access to this video studio. So we went up there on Sunday afternoon and recorded it at the bank.
The cameraman was Frank Batelli, and I edited
And
it.
it's us miming the song along with, I'd gone to the video store back when you went to the video store to get porn and looked at all the covers of the VHS tapes and tried to find ones that looked like Bill and Ted. And so we intercut them having sex. It's an X-rated video, but it played many gay film festivals. We sent it around to many film festivals, and it was a big hit. And it was really funny. It's just the latent homosexuality in the Bill and Ted's movie was just ripe, but you know, it was so cute at the same time. But you know, that again, now that's a song that I think that's why it was not on the album, because that definitely was going to have a sell date.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's still a great bit of fun. And the flip side was was our Spinal Tap cover, which actually I think is one of our best covers.
Yeah?
Chris played a great lead guitar solo on it, but you know, Big Bottom, that was just right for us to step into those shoes. And
it
we had a
also
lot of fun playing that song live.
I also feel like it showed the humor. You know, we're covering Spinal Tap. I mean,
Right.
you know, we're not taking ourselves too seriously. So that was with Patrick Hawley, who originally played the drums on the whole album, and then you brought him back out to do the new version of Femme, which I think was a smart move.
Yeah.
And then we also did Homo Christmas, which was part of the first single. Smells Like Queer Spirit was on the first single. And then also we did a Roxy
We did
Music song.
Trash, Roxy
Yeah.
Music song. Instead of it being about trashy young girls, it was about trashy young guys. So I changed some of the lyrics, had the guy wearing a backwards baseball hat. I love Roxy Music. So I thought, well, that's a song we can do from a band that I love, but it was a B-side. I think it was better as a B-side. That's where it belonged. It wasn't a must-have kind of song.
Right. I think we played it live a few times, but
Few times.
it was, yeah. And I think it was interesting because we were showing people our roots as well as the humor aspect.
Yeah.
Roxy Music and Velvet Underground, that sort of thing. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up Undressed. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for this deep dive into our first album, 30 years later. And in not too long now, we're going to be talking about album number 2 on Lookout, the Deflowered album. Very soon, we'll be celebrating that 30th anniversary. So we'll see you then.